I really don't think the state pension and the benefits are going to be sufficient, in my estimation, to give you a comfortable life in retirement. So you have to think of other ways of earning money.
Meet Sandi Goddard, a strategic brand and business consultant with over 35 years of experience. Sandi specialises in helping founders, boards and business owners gain clarity, scale effectively and prepare for successful exits. She drives growth and transformation across diverse sectors.
We don't talk about retirement enough as a nation, I think, where we're really understanding what this process is. And I know that when I speak to a lot of business owners, one of the things that they will worry about is the financial side of things.
Retirement means different things to different people. It doesn't mean you're going to stop. It could mean that you're going to transition into another field of work. If you start thinking about it early enough, then you're planning about what they should be doing to ensure that they have sufficient income to live comfortably. Whatever we do, we all have to have an income in retirement.
If you're in your 40s now, maybe thinking about retirement is too far for you in the future. But what you could start thinking about is... Hello and welcome to A Wealthy Life. In this episode, we're going to be talking about clarity, control, even legacy plans, and what will make your transition from corporate life to whatever you choose next so much easier. Today, I'm joined by Sandi Goddard, who is a corporate consultant and executive coach. Welcome, Sandi.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's see what questions I ask you first. So I was reading your chapter in Retire Inspired 2, which is a collaborative book that we've both been invited to join in. And in the opening section, I really resonated with something that you said. And I'm currently focusing my attention on corporate clients and helping them to create plans to escape the 9 to 5. Can I read you a bit of yours so that you know where I'm coming from? If you're a senior executive, retirement will not represent a simple wind down. You will find it's a transition from high-stakes decision-making world to one that is more self-directed. And after years of driving growth, managing complexity in teams, shaping your department or organization, this transition can be liberating, but it can also be extremely disorientating. You will need to develop a new and deeply personal form of leadership, one that doesn't necessarily come with team support. I love that, but I really wanted to pick up on just that last piece there. What did you mean by not coming with team support?
Well, most leaders, as they go up the ladder, are going to have people beneath them who take on most of the mundane. They do a helicopter view of the business. They're looking at strategy and control and all the rest of it, while they've got other people doing the nitty-gritty. And suddenly, depending on how you retire and what you do in retirement, of course, it depends. You may simply become an entrepreneur and have another team. But if you are actually going out there on your own, you won't have a secretary. You won't have necessarily a tech to deal with all your computers and the rest of it. I mean, you may indeed have plenty of money and be able to afford all of these things. And today, obviously, we've got bots all over the place and apps all over the place that will provide this support. But you've still got to understand how to do it. Not everybody is necessarily focused on that, because you've had other people to do this for you. When I moved away from running my agency, I no longer had a production manager and a secretary and all of those people. Suddenly I had to understand various aspects of the business that I had decided wasn't necessary because we had experts to do it. And then suddenly I had to relearn. And that may be part of what I meant by team support. That may be what you're going to have to do yourself when you go into retirement.
And you mentioned this was some of your experience. Have you seen this with clients and friends as well?
Yes, from time to time, yes. But it depends on what people do, because not everybody retires with a view of sitting on a beach for the rest of your life. I have known people who've retired and who've had nothing in their life apart from their businesses.
Yep.
And it's become very difficult for them in retirement because they just didn't know what to do with themselves. But most people have an idea. I mean, I've got family members who are looking forward to retirement in their 50s, but they're not thinking, oh, I'm going to stop. They're thinking, what's the next stage? They have to think about how they're going to be supported in that next stage. Say, for instance, they are going into property, and I know one or two are thinking like that. You still need those support systems behind you, whether that's a virtual team or not. You need that team support.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that for the baby boomers that are coming through, this mass crowd of people retiring now, we're experiencing a very different form of retirement to generations before us, because it was very much a case of you worked almost till you dropped.
Yes.
I remember that sort of being the feeling of my parents: work till you drop and then retire exhausted. And if you're lucky to have got a couple of years sitting in the armchair watching telly, then that was the best you could hope for. And you saw that in life expectancy, and you saw that in terms of people's plans. They didn't make plans because they didn't expect to live very long, because their parents hadn't lived very long. And now we've got life expectancy way up into the 80s. So even if you retire in your 60s, you've still got the potential for 20 years. And it's a completely different experience. You also wrote about how entrepreneurs need to reinvent their purpose and their identity. And I think that is so true. You just mentioned where people, all they have done is do business. Have you got any experience there?
Yes, a chairman in a firm I worked for was completely focused on the business. And even though his wife was successful and had her own business, and he was kind of supportive, he never got really involved in it because it was her business. When he finally retired, he just didn't do very much. He just watched TV. He had a few interests before, but they were mostly connected to business. So, and also if one has to remember that ill health, can also make a huge impact on what your plans are. I mean, I think that's why it's so important these days to consider. I don't think you should rely on the national health. You should rely on keeping yourself fit, eating the right food and enjoying life. I don't mean go on some sort of regimented diet, but just enjoy life, but be fit.
And I think that's very difficult if what you are is some sort of senior exec in corporate who sits in the car or the train to work and then sits in the office all the time, probably eats at their office, probably gets home late, probably just, even if you're lucky that you've got a partner who's prepared food, you're eating late. And then at the weekends, I think particularly post-COVID, people are just always now accessing work on their phones or social media, and how you find that balance. I know my experience as a business owner, you just need to identify the reason to get that clarity that you want to scale back. And we were speaking before this that I ended up, personally, I was made redundant. But for other people, you don't have to end working in the business you love or shut down the business. You talked about your agency that you love. It's about looking at your time to money ratio, as you move forward. And maybe you spoke about, I think it was relatives that were approaching their 50s. If you're in your 40s now, maybe thinking about retirement is too far for you in the future. But what you could start thinking about is, what is a stepping stone to retirement? How do I want to retire? Do I want to work to the end and then stop and then have something else? Or do I want to make my slide into retirement more gradual? And so maybe I'm going to be thinking about having a 4-day week. And I think that's really interesting to talk about, isn't it? These different approaches, the hard stop versus the sort of the gradual slowdown.
I think the hard stop can be a terrible shock to the system if you've got nothing else. And I know my husband went on to 2 days a week, which actually was really good. It was a really great way of, moving into a different life. And also retirement means different things to different people. It doesn't mean you're going to stop. It could mean that you're going to transition into another field of work. and that's why not think about it in your 40s? Because you may not want to do what you're doing forever. In your 50s, you may want to do something else. I know someone who worked in the city and decided the commute meant he didn't see his young child all day. He would see his young child at the weekends. And he changed his lifestyle and took on a completely different role. That was transitioning. It's not necessarily called retirement, but it is a transition from that
hectic.
Yes, that focused, stressful work environment to a different work environment. And that's why people often jump ship. So many entrepreneurs have been in the corporate world. And I know as also going back to the planning, it's thinking about what you want to do now and getting those
steps in place.
Oh, yes, because you just don't know what's going to happen in life. You might be made redundant. You don't know. So if you've got a side hack of some sort that you can be working on in your 5 until 9 instead of your 9 till 5, then you have something to fall back on if you need it.
Mm.
I think so. Retirement could be in your 50s, 60s, 70s. And
choice is yours.
Yeah, and it can mean different things to different people. For some people, yes, just ending it and getting on a boat and enjoying your sailing or your cruises or your holidays abroad. And I know people who've done. One of my clients, when he's retired twice, when he retired the first time, he and his wife went on so many cruises. And then he just one day thought, that's not enough. And he went back into business, in fact, it was property, but he went into a different kind of business because he needed that.
Mental stimulation.
Yes.
Absolutely. The number of people I've spoken to who've been in, let's call it a corporate role or running their own businesses and, demanding of your brain space that have then said, what they're saying, they haven't said this, but what they're saying is, I don't want to live life under this level of stress with this much demand on me. There are other things important to me in my life. That there reaches a point where they realize they're missing things, and it's often their children and their families, with a bit of luck, their partners as well as their kids. And then they're going, I want to do something different, automatically thinking that it is the holiday. But if you have been someone in your, let's say, the work phase of your life, where you are a decision maker, where you are managing teams, all the things that we said at the beginning, to actually put in that hard stop. While it might be nice to have an elongated holiday, it's not going to last because you're going to be bored. And we don't talk about retirement enough as a nation, I think, or maybe as a planet even, where we're really understanding what this process is. And I know that when I speak to a lot of business owners, one of the things that they will worry about is the financial side of things. So they're more focused on the finances and think that they have to keep working because they think how much money they need. And they've not looked back in a almost forensic accounting way and gone, well, hold on a second, I will clear my mortgage in such and such a date. So after that, I'm not going to need that extra, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 grand that I'm currently paying. Or on such and such a date, the kids will have been through school and university and be off. And so actually, while I'm thinking I need this amount of money all the way through, I don't. There is a different amount of money I need. And that's how we end up starting those conversations about property, because that is that side business that you can run basically while you're still working to generate that extra cash flow. And instead of creating a business, which is going to require your time, you're leveraging your money and your time through systems to create that portfolio that just generates cash rather than more staff, more time. But then you can expand it once you make that transition.
And that's why I think you have to be thinking about this even in your late 30s and 40s, because we are retired a very long time. You need to have the financial support as well.
Yes.
So if you start thinking about it early enough, then you're planning, you're talking to people like, I'm not a wealth expert, but they're talking to people like you, Vicki, about what they should be doing to ensure that they have sufficient income to live comfortably. And it's a very middle class conversation, but it actually goes across all classes. Whatever we do, we all have to have an income in retirement. And I really don't think the state pension and the benefits are going to be sufficient, in my estimation, to give you a comfortable life in retirement. So you have to think of other ways of earning money.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, whatever your current income, relying on a state pension, which is less than £1,000 a month, even if you've cleared your mortgage, that is a very base level of life, which is totally fine. And we're very, are we lucky we paid in for it? But I would be grateful to receive 1,000.
Even when we're complaining about the wealth of this nation and our standard of living and so on, we are wealthy in comparative terms, and therefore our lifestyles. I mean, most people can afford holidays in retirement. Most people can afford to go out and eat in retirement. I mean, I know that restaurants are full in the middle of the week, mostly of people with hair my colour. That most of us can afford to do all of these things. So we are a comparatively wealthy country, and we have a good lifestyle. That doesn't mean it's going to go on forever. So we should always plan for the future.
Absolutely. And I love talking about money. It's got to be one of my favourite topics. I think almost in part because it is so taboo and very un-British, isn't it? And I'll claim that it's my Italian side, but I don't know that they talk about money any more than I do. But I loved it when you said in the book that we're going to live a long time. And certainly in my book, The Wealthy Retirement Plan, I said that we're going to live longer than we think and longer than we can afford unless we make those plans. And I think that's the bit for me, is that we are going to live so much longer. If you don't plan, it will be longer than you can afford.
Well, I plan to live to 100. I might not get there, but
yeah, I wrote, we were talking about digital books. I wrote a digital book called The New Estate. And in that, I was the character, the fictional character, and I lived to 138. And I remember people going, oh, I don't want to live that long because you'll just be, old and doddery. And I went, no, because the medical advances are such that as long as I play my part, they're going to play their part and keep me fit and healthy. As long as my mind is active, I can fix all the rest of the body bits. And 138 would enable me to see my grandchild's grandchild. There's a little bit of cooperation here in that my grandchildren, which are only 8, 5 and a couple of weeks old, will have to breed by the time they're 25, and their children will have to breed by the time they're 25. But I can easily meet that, maybe even a generation beyond that. So I think when you start to think that through, some people never met their grandparents.
There's birthday presents you've got to buy.
Yeah, that'll be fine. I better just add in a bit more in the budget. But I think the thing for me is that some people never met their grandparents, did they? Because, and that has an implication for inheritance, because if your grandparents passed, you would have got your inheritances early. Nowadays, if you're going to live to 100, your children aren't going to get inheritance from you. Your grandchildren might not get the inheritance from you. It could be at 100, you're easily meeting your great-grandchildren or even your great-great-grandchildren.
Great, possibly, yes.
Yeah.
I actually have great-grandchildren.
Oh, do you? How wow. You definitely don't look old enough.
It's an interesting concept. My husband didn't know his grandparents. So, no, I tell a lie. He knew his maternal grandparents. He didn't know his paternal grandparents.
Yeah. But it's shifting. And I love the fact that you said, like, your mum kept telling you to prepare for retirement in your 20s, 30s. I don't know if you heard the episode that I did with Ann Taylor, and her dad was banging on at her about money in the early days. Did you listen to your mum?
I've always been a spendthrift. If I've got money, I spend it. But my husband is brilliant at, we tease him and since retirement, he's taken care of all of that aspect of our lives. And we call him the spreadsheet man. He just sheets. I mean, we're fine. We don't have to worry, but no thanks to me.
Oh dear, your poor mum, all that advice she gave you. I think
Probably because she saw I was the spendthrift of the family.
she was trying to tell you. Yeah. It's
still
quite
think they're much
interesting.
better than I am at money.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, that we pair up with someone who is that side of stuff. I am both the spreadsheet queen, but we also talk. We nickname Bob the Tesco's value man. Obviously, other supermarkets are available, but if he can find the way to find a way to save money, that's what he loves doing.
I
So
love a deal. I love it.
yeah.
But I think that might be the Scots in me. I just love a deal.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the idea that we know stuff. We get to accept maybe messages that we were told when we were younger, but we never acted on them. And I would love, I've got this sort of almost, I think, forensic need to somehow go back and interrogate the younger us's and go, why didn't you listen? You were told. And how can we tell that message better to you so that you will listen, which is something that we haven't been doing.
Yes. But I don't know if any generation listens to the generation before, so it's not something we can necessarily tell our children. Our grandchildren might listen, but our children may not. Listen to us later in life, because I know my children, we have quite in-depth conversations about things, and my grandchildren actually. So although they don't necessarily listen to me, because the next generation on Gen Z are idealists in so many ways. They're realistic too, but they just have quite a strong view of life, which I find wonderful.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I wonder if it's that. I keep thinking back to my grandparents and my granddad. In fact, both my male grandparent, well, they would be both my granddads were businessmen, one in Italy, one in the UK, and both the wives were stay-at-home wives that looked after the families. So there was no conversation from my female role models coming down through the grandparent line about money and saving money or spending money. There was no preparation for me around any of that stuff. And then when we come down to my parents, my dad was a businessman. My mum had run her own business and then stopped eventually, moved into corporate and then retired early. While she supported my dad in doing the bookkeeping for his business because she had those skills, she never talked to me about money. Not overtly. She never said, put money away. She never said budget. But what I observed, and I remember it very clearly, we used to go to Italy every year for a holiday, and she would lie out on the bed in the sort of 3 months before we were going. She would start buying things and lining them up on the bed in piles so that she could remember what she bought. Because when you go away on holiday, you've got to have new white socks as a little girl, or a new pretty dress, or a new costume, or whatever. And she would buy all of this stuff in the months before. Some holidays we would stay in a hotel, and some holidays we do self-catering. So she might buy, the stuff that we were going to take away. And we drove from London all the way to Venice every year because that's where the family were. So we would have cans of Coke in the car and a little sweetie box with all our snacks in the back. And then if we were self-catering, we'd take some food with us. And interesting to watch her do that. And I know that I am almost like an American prepper, not quite as strong as an American prepper, but I do have prepper tendencies. So I have picked it up instinctively, but not overtly. And I just wonder if there was anything, while you didn't, if I can paraphrase, listen to your mum about planning.
No, I think we often learn by doing or learn by watching. And I think most of us are visual animals. And certainly both my grandmother and my mother were very strong northern women in many ways. In both cases, I think the finances were in their hands and the financial planning and so forth.
Because the men were busy working, earning.
Yeah, I think. And I came across notebooks of my mother's full of budgets and so on.
Oh, wow.
I like to. I'm a list maker. I like to plan with a view that I like the structure. It can change.
Yes.
But I like to have that shape. So I know where, so for instance, if we're going away for the weekend, I've already in my head already planned what we're taking. If it's self-catering, I've already thought about the food and the meals and what we're taking. So although it's not financial planning, it's life planning. So
yes. So there are some traits in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're saying here, isn't it? Is maybe observe what sort of planner you are. I love planned spontaneity and I love rigid flexibility, which I think is your list, idea. Is I like the list, but I like the flexibility that the list then gives me to go off topic. But if we don't think about the future, and if I then bring in the word legacy, if we don't think about the future, not as in what you're going to live in your will, but the, I suppose on a grand scale, the impression that you live on the planet, more macro, those that you maybe leave, the impression that you leave on the people that are around you before the end, if you just stay in that corporate role, I think that the corporate's going to forget you. They'll change the name on your door, so here's your office door and the name will be coming off your door before you've even walked out the front door. We think we matter, but the people that we actually matter to are our family and our friends. And so I sort of use the word legacy to mean them. How do you want to leave them feeling? Yes, you want them to miss you in the end when you go, but you don't want them to miss you because they've never had you. You want them to have had such wonderful memories with you that they've got something to hang on to, and that you're leaving a gap in their life because of the fun and the joy that you bring, not just the wage packet that you were. So I know, again, from your chapter, you're talking about not making work your life. And I think that's so poignant. We think that we're important to our employers and we're not, are we?
No, but I think there's more to legacy than just family and friends, because I also think if you're good at what you do, you're also going to make an impact on the people who work with you and for you. And they take something away, your style or your ethos, and apply it themselves. And they remember things you say. So it's not, your family is larger, I think, than blood. So our friends are part of our family, how we behave with them. And I don't know if you're the same, but you might not see someone for 20 years and then you fall back into touch with them and it's as if we've never left. The feelings and the emotions, the way we behave with each other and speak to each other is all the same. And I think retirement is part of that, isn't it? It's that what we carry through our lives and into the next stage of our lives. And we should be the same with our family and friends, as well as our employees, team members, suppliers, the people who work with clients. I try to be what you see is what you get, and I'm not very good at. I can be gullible as well, unfortunately, because of that. But I'm not very good at hiding my emotions. I try to be authentic, and I'm hoping that I have delivered during my working life some really useful life tips to my teams that have worked with me, and that will provide them with success as they move on.
That's what I mean about the legacy. It is that impact that you leave with people, isn't it? A bit of the dust.
Someone once said to me, think of life as a bit of paper caught on some chicken wire, and every winter it gets destroyed a bit more and a bit more until there's nothing there. And that's us, that we're forgotten. And I think, no, are we forgotten? I think if we are able to help each generation to have honesty, great ethics and values, that we will be remembered. I mean, obviously we're remembered through our genes anyway, but,
Yeah, no, I think you've really hit something there, haven't you? Something almost deeply spiritual, that idea that in our interactions, we are leaving a little bit of ourselves in the wake of that conversation, in the wake of that moment that you've shared with someone. And it'll be bigger or smaller little bits of dust that you leave with people, and they'll leave with you. And that's how we can move forward. And I think that's a wonderful way to sort of explain what I mean by legacy, you know, this idea of what you leave behind. I love that. I really do.
My daughter said to me recently, she finds she's using phrases that I used. And she explained one of them, said, I use it and I don't even know what it means. Oh, hope you do. But, and I thought, yes, she says, we all become our mothers. And I thought, well, yeah, I suppose a little bit, not completely.
Yeah, not completely. But the people around you are going to have the most influence on you, aren't they? And I mean, I suppose when we're younger, it's our parents. As we get older, it's our partner. And then hopefully our children also start to have an influence on us as we have an influence on them. You talked about your Gen Zs being so idealistic. Wouldn't it be wonderful to get a little bit more of that back into our lives?
Are changing us, because there are phrases that were commonplace in the 80s and 90s I wouldn't dream of using today. And that is partly because of my grandchildren saying, oh, you can't say that. Oh, you mustn't say that. They're not meant to be racist or sexist or anything like that. It's just that we grew up with them.
Yes.
It's about the meaning.
Yes.
Depth of meaning.
Yes.
So
and the impact of our words on others.
So we do learn from the next generation.
Yeah.
You know, or we should.
We should. We should. Yeah.
One of the things about coaching that I love when I'm working with my clients, helping them to understand that every generation is the same, but every generation is different. We are different from our parents' generation for all sorts of reasons. And our thought processes and attitudes were completely different. And it's the same 2 generations on, you know.
Yeah. So while we think we're different, we're not. We're still going through the same process. We're still eating, sleeping, working. We're still struggling with the same
issues. And also, we're also honest, nice people who try to be fair and even-handed with their teams. And that's what our teams expect. It's just that we might present it differently, or they might expect it to be communicated differently. And that, I think, is the same in retirement. We've got to think about how we communicate retirement to people, or how we communicate our retirement to people. So when my grandchildren say, what, don't you want to retire? I think, well, I am retired. I'm just not working 7 days or 5 days a week. I'm working maybe 2 days a week.
I think we started off that conversation when we were introducing ourselves. Because of the property portfolio, I effectively retired when I was 48. That's way too young. I mean, like over 20 years ago, I could have moved to a beach somewhere. I would be insane. Bob's ears would be bleeding. He would be pulling his earlobes off because I wouldn't have stopped talking to him.
Up running a bar.
Well, no, I mean, he would. If we had been running a bar, he would be a full-on alcoholic just to get away from me. Imagine living with me for 20 years with nothing to keep me busy. But that's the thing, isn't it? You can't. There are some people who can. There are some people that have like almost used all their energy up, and they need that bit of decompression. And then maybe because they've been quite isolated at work, they get their, let's call it second life energy by being in community groups. And they may go and work in the community, or they may join bowls or golf or tennis or any sort of other activity. You mentioned, sailing. They can do all of that sort of stuff. But then there are other people who maybe have a different way of thinking, that engine, while the body might be tired, the soul might be tired, that little piece of their brain is still whirling. And so understanding that you've got to have this transition, which I think is the big word out of all of this, that if you can start planning your transition as early as possible, you could not hit that brick wall and stop for retirement. You could slide into it at your own pace. What would your advice be if I had to get you to just do one sentence to sort of like wrap this up? What would your piece of advice be to somebody working in their 9 to 5 now, whatever age they are, to help them start planning that transition?
I think I'd ask them to do the balcony test. Stand on a balcony and look at yourself now and wonder what you would rather be doing in 10 or 20 years' time, and then start planning for it. Because none of us want to be stuck at a desk for 40 years, really. And can I go back to legacy before we finish? And I really admire people like this, the people who volunteer or get involved in community businesses, and that's a wonderful legacy to leave behind, all that support that they give other people. And there's that. You don't have to have a business. You could be a volunteer.
Absolutely.
So necessary. And you're bringing all that knowledge.
The knowledge transfer is so valuable, isn't it? You know, and while the younger generations, we just had that conversation, didn't we? While the younger generations don't always listen to the older generation, there are still things that we have been through that may not be exactly how they are now, but you could learn from, here's my lesson, learn from my lesson, and how can we apply that lesson in this more modern setting? But there's loads of things that we can do. And I've worked with that all my life, from when I was first a university lecturer, getting the students to understand that they had transferable skills, to when I wrote the Wealthy Retirement Plan and I was talking about the 4 M's, and one of them was multi-generational. This idea that we can pass the knowledge up and down the ages for the benefit of all.
What can you do? What do you love doing? Is it practical to be able to do that as a retirement, as your next role, and be financially secure?
Is it something that you need to earn from, or is it something that you can do for pleasure?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Sandi, we've run out of time. It goes so fast, doesn't it? I just want to really thank you for your time and say how much I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
So I'm going to share all your links and the show notes, everything in the podcast, so that people can get in touch. What I'd like to do now is just reflect back for the listeners, because I love to show my appreciation to them. And what I want to do is leave them with 3 wishes to make sure that their time listening to us has added that bit of wish in their life by making these 3 points. I think for me that it has been, number 1, start as early as possible. And if today's the day that you're listening to the podcast, today's the day you need to start thinking about your retirement. How do you want to end? Abruptly? Do you want to slide into it as a tradition? And Sandi used this idea of the balcony, looking out to the future. What is it that you want for your life? I think I would then look at planned spontaneity. And for me, the planning side would be spreadsheet, of course. So sorry, listeners, you know how I love a spreadsheet. It's always going to come up. But I would get the spreadsheet out and I would just have columns that literally went from your age now up to 65, and then think about the things that are going to change. When will your mortgage be paid off? When will the kids stop needing the bank of mum and dad if they're involved? You know, and then look at, well, at what point does the demand on me to make the income I'm making now start to change? And therefore, if the demands aren't there financially, that could be the point at which I start thinking about how I want to use my time. But you've done a spreadsheet, which is planning, but now you can be spontaneous about it. It doesn't then have to rule your life. It's just more knowledge. And I think the third one would be, don't be in too much of a hurry. So having said, plan as soon as possible, but don't be in too much of a hurry to hit that full stop. That a transition could be the perfect way. What you could do is, let's say 50, that you decide from 50 to 70, you're going to transition into some other form of maybe employed work, maybe a business outside of corporate, maybe just working with the community. And then maybe you're going to transition again at 70 and you're going to step back one more way. Maybe you'll have holidays in the middle and then you'll do a business again at the other side. It really doesn't matter. It's whatever you want, as long as you think about it, you plan it, you make sure that you can afford it. And I think that would be it for me. Sandi, those are my insights. I just love to, again, say thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there any insight that you would love to share with our listeners?
Only other thing I would add would be, think about that gap year in your 60s. I think that would be fabulous.
Yeah.
I know many people do it now. I mean, we've got something planned.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you. All of Sandi's details will be in the show notes, as I've said. I really appreciate your time listening. And of course, if you've loved this podcast that Sandi and I have done, I would really appreciate you subscribing. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. And of course, leave a review, a thumbs up, a heart, anything that you can to let us know that you're out there and you're loving it. And let me leave you with a question. What would your ideal, and I'm going to use the word retirement, what would your ideal retirement be? Do you want to work till the end? Do you want to transition? And if you're going to transition, which is sort of the answer I'm hoping you're going to give, what are you going to transition into? I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you very much again. And Sandi has been part of a group of authors that I've been speaking to from the Retire, Inspire 2 book. You'll see the links in the show notes for that. Make sure you go back and pick up on the other podcasts that have been with Andrew Priestley, Jessica McGregor Johnson, Anne Taylor, and Chris and Susan Beasley. So those have been out during August, and now we're finishing off with Sandi. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.